were bent, and then it hardened. All the layers you see in the earth that are bent were all soft at the same time. They are not different ages. A friend of mine's a pilot. He sent me this picture. He said, Brother Hovind, as we fly over Grand Canyon, off to the sides of the canyon, there are sinkholes. The water runs into these holes and goes down, who knows how far, and then squirts out the side of the canyon into Grand Canyon. Well, if it keeps eroding away that sinkhole, it's going to eventually wash out and make another side canyon. After the flood, in Noah's time, the surface would dry out first, leaving the inside still soft, muddy ground, which would slowly dry out. As it dries, it shrinks and contracts, causing wrinkling on the surface. As mountains lifted up, it would cause metamorphic rock to be formed. This formed, I believe, during and after Noah's flood. Skeptics say, well, wait, excuse me, now how did all these kangaroos get to Australia, and why are they only there? Well, I believe after the flood was over, the oceans were smaller than they are today. Today, the earth is under 70% of it's under water. I don't think it was that way right after Noah got off the ark. If you look at this map, you can see England and Ireland were part of France. If you lowered the water just a few hundred feet, everything would dry up in between England and France. That was probably the beach line way out there. You can see it from this satellite view. If you look very carefully, you can see that's England and Ireland there. You can see under the water and see the beach line where it used to be. The water is really very shallow along there. Between Alaska and Russia, the water is only 60 feet deep, about from here to that pole. 60 feet. If you lowered the oceans 60 feet, Russia and Alaska would be connected. If you raised the oceans, America, all of Central America would flood. If you raised the oceans just 10%, this is what America would look like. One little island over in Appalachia and all the Rocky Mountain area, and that's it. All of central United States would be flooded. Did you know Chicago is only 600 feet above sea level? 600 feet. You know, from here to the stop sign, 2 football fields. That's how high Chicago is above sea level. If you lowered the oceans a few hundred feet, Florida would be huge. Cuba would be annexed to Florida. I believe during the end of the flood, as the oceans filled in, everything got stabilized, and then the ice caps melted back, raising the ocean levels even more. Probably the Atlantic Ocean got too full and spilled over into the Gulf of Mexico. We'll cover more on that in a minute. Pensacola Bay and Mobile Bay are about 7 feet deep. You can stand up just about any place out there in Pensacola Bay. If you lowered the waters a few hundred feet, Australia would be connected to Vietnam. The water between Vietnam and Australia is very shallow. So the kangaroos, people say, how did the kangaroos get to Australia? They hopped. That's how they get everywhere. See, kangaroos and wombats and koalas are non-aggressive. I mean, compared to tigers, they're just not very aggressive. So when animals got off the ark and over here in Turkey where it landed, they're going to start spreading out and establishing their territory. And the kangaroo's got his home and he's raising his family, and all of a sudden the tigers come in. I want this property. Okay, so rather than fight, they run. Less aggressive animals would constantly be pushed to the migration fringe, to the edge, okay? They would rather run than fight. And they ended up, over generations, over maybe, who knows, 100 years or so, they keep spreading out, and those that don't run get killed, and they end up in Australia down here. But at the same time, while they're being pushed to the edge of the migration fringe, the water's coming up because the ice caps are melting back. And as the ice caps melt back, the water comes up, and all of a sudden, Australia is protected. It's now an island, where it used to be part of the mainland. And they just got as far away as they could get from the tigers, and then that's where they got stuck, in Australia. And we have a continental shelf today because of the ice melting back, adding depth to the oceans. If the earth was shrunk down to the size of this globe, you couldn't even find Mount Everest. You ever see those globes where you can feel the bumps on them, you can feel the mountains? That's baloney. They have to greatly exaggerate those mountains. If you shrank the earth down to the size of a cue ball to play pool with, the earth would be rounder and smoother than the cue ball. A 5-mile mountain on an 8,000-mile earth is insignificant. We talked about raising the oceans greatly changes the shapes of the continents, and so does lowering the oceans. I think these erosion marks happen, these erosion canyons and things happen after the flood. Minneapolis, for instance, is 670 feet above sea level. Well, the Mississippi River runs from Minneapolis to New Orleans. It's about 1,150 miles away. As it runs, the Mississippi drops 670 feet in 1,150 miles. That's 7 inches every mile. The Mississippi has to run a full mile to drop 7 inches. Very low slope, very gently moving, generally. If you built a dam across Grand Canyon, a really big lake would fill in behind it. Textbooks say over millions of years the Colorado River carved Grand Canyon from solid rock. I don't think so. I've studied Grand Canyon pretty actively. Grand Canyon had to form as a result of enormous erosion, as we covered on video 4, and you saw in Walt Brown's hydroplate theory video clip there. Grand Canyon is kind of puzzling because the river loops back and forth, but it also has steep sides. Now, a looping river like the Mississippi is usually indication of, low slope, gradually sloping ground, so the river loops back and forth. Steep sides usually indicates fast-moving river on high slope. Grand Canyon has both. Steep sides and loops and meanders. And the evolutionists will say, wow, I wonder how that river made that canyon. The river didn't make that canyon. The flood made Grand Canyon. Very, very quickly. One catastrophe can really rearrange the real estate. In 1964, there was an earthquake in Alaska that dropped sections of neighborhoods down 40 or 50 feet. I was at Turnagain Heights preaching up there, I'm going up there again this September into Anchorage, Alaska. The incredible damage done just in a few seconds to that community. When Mount St. Helens blew its top, the whole north side of the mountains slid down into the valley. My sister lived up near there when it happened. This whole top of the mountain slid off to the side, uncorked the volcano, and steam and ash came shooting out of the volcano at about 100 miles an hour. This ash cloud covered the countryside. My sister got about 6 inches in her yard. 60-some people died as a result of Mount St. Helens blowing all this ash and steam all over the neighborhood. Some of the ash landed in New York City. Most of it landed in this pattern you can see here on this map. Mount St. Helens, the day of the devastation, there was pyroclastic flows that flowed where the red is indicated there, mud flow deposits where the brown is, debris avalanche deposits, lateral blast, just a blast of steam and energy coming out, knocked trees down in the light brown area there. And Mount St. Helens was a small volcano by volcano standards. Nothing like Krakatoa in Indonesia. As the swirling mass came down the mountainside, it automatically sorted into layers. This mud flow flowing down the mountain covered up blocks of ice that were blown off the volcano when the eruption took place. Here's a semi half buried in mud. It blew enough mud out that everybody on earth can have a ton of it. It would fill a 10 cubic yard dump truck every second, 24 hours a day for 600 years. That's how much mud was moved out of that volcano. As the mud flowed down, it flowed over blocks of ice that were as big as a house because they were blown off the volcano. It used to be covered by glaciers. Beautiful, beautiful mountain. These blocks of ice under this hot mud exploded, making erosion pits. This happened in a few seconds. Now, some teacher's going to bring his kids here someday and say, boys and girls, you see this erosion along the side of this pit? This took millions of years. No, teacher, my daddy saw this happen. It took about 50 seconds. The landslide of May 8th buried the river and the highway to Spirit Lake to an average depth of 100 feet. It also buried most other drainages in the 23 square